In week one of the book of Nehemiah, we went through chapter 1 of Nehemiah. Okay, and we talked about his prayer to God, which revealed his heart to us, right? When he found out that Jerusalem was being rebuilt, the temple was being rebuilt, but the walls were still down, and everybody in Jerusalem was still vulnerable to outside attack. He just fell before God, hit his knees, prayed this beautiful prayer. We learned a lot about his heart there. In chapter 2, we found a lot about his courage, right? How he went to the king and he said, "Hey, the king noticed that he was sad, and he said, 'What can I do for you?' And Nehemiah was just like, 'Okay, I got it. This is what I need to do. This is what I need to do, where I need to go.'" He spoke with boldness before the king. It was awesome, right? So we've learned a lot about Nehemiah, his qualities, his heart, his leadership. In chapter 3, we're not going to be in chapter 3 today. We're actually going to be in chapter 4, but I'm going to do a quick summary for this. So it's always on my heart that we move through entire books of the Bible together, but we will come across long chapters of the Bible that are just endless genealogies, stuff like that. It's not really practical to sit here and read through all those things. What chapter 3 really is Nehemiah's breakdown of who was working to rebuild the wall and what part of the wall they were working to rebuild. So whether it was the sheep gate, the dung gate, all the different gates that they had, he talked about who it was that was responsible for rebuilding those areas of the wall. What we can take away from chapter 3 without reading through it syllable by syllable, verse by verse, is that it was different groups throughout Jerusalem, different Israelite groups that came together to build the walls. And this is everybody from the high priest down to the poorest shepherd. So the high priest was Eliashib, and he helped to rebuild the sheep's gate. Everybody came together from different social standings, working on the gates and working on different parts of the wall. The national identity was very, very important to them in returning home. They had a common purpose. They had a common faith. National identity, common purpose, common faith can bring people together. You know, we have our flags in this country. We have our national anthem. We have these things that bring us together, that unify us, hopefully unify us, right? I remember after 9/11, some of us here are old enough to remember how the country was after 9/11 and just how that feeling of patriotism and how united we felt. Really in our grief, we were grieving together as a family, the entire country, and it didn't matter what side of the aisle you were on. Everybody just kind of came together. We had that national identity. We had that common theme, that common purpose. Chapter 3 also shows us that different Christians can come together to do things, right? Because within the Israelites, there are different tribes, there are so many different social groups, and they're coming together to rebuild the wall. And that got me thinking about the March for Life, the Walk for Life that happens in March every year in Washington, D.C., where we have Lutherans and we have Baptists and we have Catholics and we have all these different kinds of Christians that come together that have this identity in Christ, right? Coming together to speak out about life in our nation. We just have to make sure that these things are of God, okay? So the Nazis and the Iron Curtain and the Soviet Union, they had a national identity, they had flags, they had anthems, but these were really godless regimes, right? So the problem is when we rally around these national symbols or these things, but we remove God from the equation, we have to keep God at the center of everything that we do as a church, as a nation, okay? We have to be careful because what ends up happening is you idolize the state or you idolize your government or you idolize these things when really we're servants of God. We're Christians before we are anything else, right? So I commend chapter 3 to you. You can read it on your own. It's a great chapter, but today we're going to be living in chapter 4. If you want to turn to Nehemiah chapter 4, we're also going to have the verses up here on the screen. And our theme today is perseverance through opposition. Perseverance through opposition. So chapter 4, starting in verse 1. When Sanballat heard that we were rebuilding the wall, he became furious. He mocked the Jews before his colleagues and the powerful men of Samaria and said, "What's pathetic Jews doing? Can they restore it by themselves? Will they offer sacrifices? Will they ever finish? They bring these burnt stones back to life from the mounds of rubble." When Tobiah the Ammonite, who was beside him, said, Then Tobiah the Ammonite, who was beside him, said, "Indeed, even if a fox climbed up what they were building, he would break down the walls. He would break down their stone wall." So we learned a little bit about Sanballat and Tobiah last week. Here they are. They're back. They're haters. They're mockers. They're enemies of Israel. They hate Israel, and they want Israel to fail in this endeavor. Okay? All Israel's trying to do at this point is protect themselves. All they're trying to do, they've rebuilt the temple. All they're trying to do is build walls and not be vulnerable to attack for the people around them. Their motives are pure in this instance. But we have to be aware of opposition at all times. Sanballat and Tobiah are people, they're flesh and blood, but there's something behind their opposition to Israel. We have to be aware of opposition, where it comes from, and we have to know what it is and what it isn't. Because behind everything that we see is another world. Behind everything that we see around us, this world of flesh and blood, there is a spiritual world, there is another realm. And there are enemies of God in that place too. There are enemies of God in that place. And there are sons of God in that place. And there are good beings in that place. And they are at war. But how they're fighting that war is here. And this is their. These forces affect life here in our realm. Is the most famous passage that shows this. For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, against the rulers, against the authorities, against the cosmic powers over this present darkness, against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly places. Do you see what we're saying here? There's a whole other realm. And these places, and in these places, people are at war with God. Look at 2 Corinthians 4:18. We see again, so we fix our eyes. This, what is unseen is eternal. We're talking about the unseen realm. I was really happy to chat with Bill this morning after Bible study because I found out that he's a Michael Heiser fan, like I'm a Michael Heiser fan, and Dr. Heiser, God rest his soul, he's no longer with us, talks a lot about and has written a lot about the unseen realm. It's an eternal world where the enemies of God are using lost humanity like puppets. It's on a string. They want confusion. They want chaos. They want havoc. They want death. They use lust. They use power. They use all sorts of things to bring people in and use the sin of people to accomplish that in our realm. Okay? Our God is a God of order. He's a God of order. He's a God of love, of goodness, of compassion. He wants peace first in the hearts of his people, and then peace in the hearts of everyone around us as we bring his message, the gospel, to the world. I don't know if you guys, some of you guys are old enough to see this movie. Some of you aren't, but the movie The Matrix. If you've ever seen The Matrix in the 90s, one of the best movies of the 90s, and it really has a great vision of like seen versus unseen, good versus evil, and really kind of the gospel where Neo is the one who's come as a savior. And it really shows, so people are plugged in, they're plugged in like batteries. And the machines who are running the world are sucking the life out of the people. And what they're doing is they're projecting images into their mind of a world where they can be anything they want to be, you know what I mean? They can follow any of their heart's desires, and they need to be unplugged from this world to be able to see the truth, right? They're just being used. They think they're free, but they're not free. They're actually in chains. So what happens is the ship, the Nebuchadnezzar and Morpheus, they're going around and they're offering people this salvation choice between a blue pill and a red pill. And if you take the one pill, you can return to the matrix and just go back to living the lies and staying plugged in and being used by the machines. Or you could take, was it the blue or the red? Take the blue pill, I think. I should have really thought about that one. You take the blue pill, yeah, and then you come out of the matrix, And then all of a sudden you see things for the way that they are. And then you go around trying to unplug other people so that they can see the truth. So we have to see things for what they are. People who mock and oppose the gospel are being used. They're being used by forces that they can't see. Okay? People unplugged from that see everything as it is. We don't want to hate people or mock people or not have compassion for people who are still plugged in. Because like we should remember what it was like when we were living that way, when we were plugged into the matrix and we just could not get out of our own way. And we were believing the lies that were being told, to us. And then we get unplugged and here we are. We should have compassion for these folks. Never return. Find a way to love them in situations. We were loved into the kingdom and they can be loved into the kingdom. That said, we know that there are consequences for following evil, right? And these consequences can be very, very severe and they can be eternal. God allows for this. He reaches out with the gospel, free gift offer, no strings attached. He offers freedom from chains, from death, right? But if that offer is rejected, there are consequences for that. Nehemiah, to this point, has been extremely patient. He's been extremely loving, but his patience is running thin. He prays for Sanballat and the enemies of Israel to receive the consequences that are due them. Verse 4. Listen, our God, that we are despised. Make their insults return on their own heads and let them be taken as plunder to a land of captivity. Do not cover their guilt or let their sin be erased from your sight, because they have angered the builders. This is a pretty harsh prayer, right? But it's justified. We'll see as we read on that Sanballat and Tobiah actually have even more nefarious purposes here than just mocking Israel, right? Nehemiah wants God to extend his righteous arm and protection and provision for the people of Israel. Our God is not a pushover, and he's not a pacifist. He is ultimately loving, but he's also a warrior. He's also a warrior. He's for us. He will destroy his enemies in the end for his glory and for the good of all. Only once they are past the point of being saved. And there's not a person on earth, flesh and blood, that knows when that is. Only God knows. So what I've been saying for months is don't give up on people. Don't give up on people. We don't judge and we can't condemn. We can judge actions. We can certainly judge actions and we can condemn actions, but we can't condemn people. Okay? We always have to believe that right until the very end, that God has a plan for this person. And now we see the perseverance of Nehemiah and the people. Verse 6. Until the eye was joined at its height, for the people had the will to keep working. Israel did not allow for evil to break their spirits. They continued to rebuild the wall. They continued to renew their faith. It said the people had the will to keep working. This is divine will and this is human will coming together so that God's will and purposes can be done in the world. It's really, really beautiful thing. God invites us into the mission of fulfilling his will in the world. He gives us his son for salvation and his spirit for guidance. He wants us to lean into his will in such a way that our will aligns with his will. Against all odds, the people of Israel continued to rebuild. They believed that God wanted them to return home. They stood on his promises. May we continue to stand on his promises here at Bethel. Things really feel like they're banging on all cylinders right now, I'll be honest with you. You guys went a long time without a pastor, and then we came together, and unexpectedly this beautiful thing started to happen, and God's doing all these amazing things here at the church. It's kind of a nice honeymoon period, to be honest, right? I'm enjoying it, as I know you are, but we will face challenges in this place. We will face challenge in this place. We will have disagreements. If the Lord blesses us to grow, the dynamic will shift in here, right? Disagreements over the direction of the church could come. We could have arguments over money. Churches argue about money all the time. We had a really good meeting a couple weeks ago. We were kind of came away with it like, oh, that was a really good meeting about money, which is awesome because the finance committee is just they're in lockstep. But can we remember those times that we need to realign with God? We need to stay aligned with God. Do we know our enemy? Do we believe that he exists? Do we know that the enemy has plans for this place and they're not aligned with what God has for this place? So if we understand that our battle is not with flesh and blood, but our battle is with the powers and principalities, then we pray and we love each other. So that when we get into that conflict, I'm not looking at this person and saying, this is my enemy. I'm saying, this is my brother or this is my sister, and we're disagreeing right now. And that's okay. That's okay. We can pray and we can come to an agreement together, right? Because we're brothers and sisters. Pray like Nehemiah, and we lead like Nehemiah, and we humble ourselves like Nehemiah. We can persevere through opposition, persevere through our challenges as a church. You guys have already proven this. You went a long time without a pastor. There were some lean times here in this church, but you trusted God. You aligned with each other. You aligned with Him. You trusted God. So let's keep each other, remind me when the time comes, right? I'm accountable to you. We're accountable to each other. If I forget, remind me. Say, Pastor, you're not aligned with the Lord right now. Okay? Let's keep each other mocking them. When Sanballat declared that the repair to the walls of Jerusalem was progressing and that the gaps were being closed, they became furious. They plotted together to come and fight against Jerusalem and throw it into confusion. So their plan all along wasn't just mocking, it was violence. It was violence. They were going to come in against the people of God and throw it into confusion, is the verse. See what I mean? The enemy is always about chaos. The enemy is always about confusion. And again, Nehemiah and the Israelites, they know exactly where to turn. Verse 9. So we prayed to our God and stationed a guard because of them day and night. In Judah, it was said, in there, right? They're starting to feel it. They're starting to feel the weight. Pessimism is a cancer. Cynicism is a cancer. It has to be rooted out at all costs. We are resurrection people. We do not live as those without hope. So, regardless of what happens here on earth and what happens within our individual lives, we kneel before our Maker. We submit it all to Him and His will for us, and we live for each other in the meantime. We know that regardless of what happens here on earth, He's the King of heaven. God has already prevailed, and He will prevail again. And then look at what it says here. Unfortunately, it has given the enemy some confidence in this situation. Verse 11, he said, "We won't realize it until we're among them and can kill them and stop the work." When the Jews who lived nearby arrived, they said to us time and again, "Everywhere you turn, they attack us." So the enemies of Israel at this point, they feel impossible. They attack because they are confident. They believe that this is going to go in their favor. They can sense the pessimism in this place. And this is a really, really crucial moment for Nehemiah. Very crucial moment. As a leader, he has a responsibility to do something. He has a responsibility to act. You cannot step into a role of leadership in this life and not be willing to act. And you can't be a coward. Okay? That doesn't mean you can't be afraid. Leaders get afraid. Trust me, I'm a chief in the Navy. I get afraid. And I've been afraid many times in my career. It's what happens when the fear comes. How do you react to that fear? Who do you trust when you're afraid? Who do you go to? Who's empowering you? Good leaders act despite their fears. Cowards are crippled by their fears. And the Bible has a lot to say about cowardice, and none of it's good. None of it's good. And it's not just about not running when the bullets start flying, okay? It's about running whenever things get hard. We have to learn how to walk into the wind and do hard things. As a church, people will abandon their families. They'll turn a blind eye to sin. They'll turn a blind eye to each other. They'll leave churches. There's all kinds of things that people will do to avoid hard things. And we can't avoid hard things in this place. We have to be willing. And it's not my leadership. It's his leadership, right? And you are leaders too. And you're going to be leaders in this place. Every single person here has a role, just like the rebuilding of the wall in chapter 3. Every single beating heart in this room matters. And you're all going to be leaders at some point, whether somebody's leading the children, women's Bible study, men's Bible study. You're all going to be leaders in this place. That's my prayer. So what kind of man, what kind of leader is Nehemiah? Verse 13, the lowest sections of the wall at the vulnerable areas. Station them by families with their swords, spears, and bows. After I made an inspection, I stood up and said to the nobles, the officials, and the rest of the people, don't be afraid of them. Remember the great and awe-inspiring Lord and fight for your countrymen, your sons and daughters, your wives and homes. I got my blood pumping. I love a set of verses there. It made me think of Braveheart, another 90s movie, Mel Gibson. He's like, Nehemiah acts, and he acts quickly. He puts a plan in place, and he leads his people. He stations them with weapons. He's strategic, and he's decisive. And the best thing is, he strengthens them with hope. He strengthens them with hope. Verse 14 says he inspected the ranks and he stood up. Posture is really important. He stood up to speak to them in the corner. He was speaking to nobles and officials. Remember, this guy was just a cupbearer a couple months ago. He was a cupbearer to the king. And now he's leading the people of Israel to rebuilding their walls. It's incredible. Look back at what he said when he stood to speak. Don't be afraid of them. Remember the great, inspiring Lord and fight for your countrymen, your sons and daughters, your wives and homes. He doesn't say, don't be afraid of them because I am here. Nehemiah, follow me. But don't be afraid of them. Remember the great and awe-inspiring God that will fight for you. Great leaders will point people to God every time. Nehemiah's a great leader, not because he has faith in Nehemiah. He's a great leader because he has faith in God, the God who made him. The great, awe-inspiring Lord that will fight for you. Do we need this reminder today when we don't get the news we want to hear? Maybe an election doesn't go our way. Maybe the mockers have finally gotten to us. When all seems lost, remember the great and awe-inspiring Lord that will fight for you. It seems like the enemies of God recognize this. They see the hope. They see the leadership. Verse 15. Who's heard that we knew their scheme and that God had frustrated it? Every one of us returned to his own work on the wall. From that day on, half of my men did the work, while the other half held spears, shields, bows, and armor. The officers supported all the people of Judah who were rebuilding the wall. The laborers who carried the loads worked with one hand and held a weapon with the other. Each of the builders had his sword strapped around his waist while he was building. The ram's horn was beside me. He said to the nobles, the officials, and the rest of the people, the work is enormous and spread out, and we are separated far from one another along the wall. Wherever you hear the sound of the ram's horn, rally to us there. Our God will fight for us. So we continued the work, while half of the men were holding spears from daybreak until the stars came out. At that time I also said to the people, let everyone and his servant spend the night inside Jerusalem, so that they can stand guard by night and work by day. And I, my brothers, my servants, and the men of the guard with me, never took off our clothes. Each carried his weapon, even when washing. The enemies were discouraged when they saw hope, when they see leadership, when they see the God of Israel stretching his arm over his people. They become cowards themselves. They become frustrated. Nehemiah armed his builders, and he set up watches. This is not a pacifist response to aggression. It's okay to protect yourself. It's okay to protect your family. It's okay to protect your nation. There's nothing wrong with that. If you are strong, then you can be a blessing to your family. If your family is strong, your family can be a blessing to other families. If your nation is strong, then it can be a blessing to other nations. If you do it for your own sake, it's selfish. You can become a tyrant. If you do it for God's sake and his glory, you will be a blessing. Strength that comes from God is not toxic. It is self-sacrificial love. Powers and principalities that I mentioned before, they have no answer for it. They have no answer for this kind of love, a love that gives itself up. They want chaos. They want confusion. Look at the world right now, the world that we're living in. Chaos, confusion. Chaos and confusion. Strong people, strong families, strong churches, strong nations are the antidote to this. We can help stem the tide of evil, even if only here in Bloxom, with self-sacrificial love. Not because we're special, but because he's special. The devil hates it. So he breaks apart families, he breaks apart churches, and he breaks apart nations. And it cripples us. It cripples us from being a blessing to others. And of course, we have our ultimate example, don't we? Jesus Christ. He is the personification of humble strength. He is what we look towards. He stood his ground, but he emptied himself to serve. He was strong, but he wasn't proud. He was capable, but he wasn't a tyrant. He is the model of self-sacrificial love. And he models it for us so that we can reflect it to the world. And he's no babe in the woods, right? When the time comes, he's coming on a white horse with a sword in his mouth. Okay? The enemies of God will be destroyed in the end. Okay? But self-sacrificial love is the way there. I'm going to close with another one of our anchor verses. I know I said last week, Revelation 21 is going to be a one that we go through a lot and that we talk about a lot and that we read through a lot. This is going to be another one. Colossians 1:15 through 20 is actually a creed of the early church. If you're reading Colossians in your Bible, which is one of the most underrated letters of Paul, and you get to this part, you'll see that it kind of like indents on each side and turns into almost like lyrics to a song. It's because scholars believe wholeheartedly that this was actually a creed about Jesus in the early church, right? So I want to read through this, and I want to think about the Christ-like strength of Nehemiah and of what he did through self-sacrifice to help his people rebuild the wall. Colossians 1:15. He is the invisible God, firstborn over all creation. For everything was created by him in heaven and on earth, the visible and the invisible, whether thrones or dominions or rulers or authorities, all things have been created through him and for him. He is before all things, and by him all things hold together. He is also the head of the body, the church. He is the beginning, the firstborn from the dead, so that he might come to have first place in everything. For God was pleased to have all his fullness dwell in him, and through him to reconcile everything to himself, whether things on earth or things in heaven, by making peace through his blood shed on the cross. Peace through his blood. The powers and principalities have no answer for it. Jesus has cracked the code. Love, in the end, is what shatters chaos and confusion. Love, in the end, is what shatters chaos and confusion. Nehemiah understood this. He didn't know Jesus, not yet. He knows him now. But he had the strength and the humility to know that when God makes promises, they're written in the stars. The promises for Israel and Jerusalem, the promises of salvation for us here today, in this place, and where we will be able to live and walk humbly with our God forever. I'm going to have Miss Nikki pray over us, as if little Miss Elizabeth will allow her. And we'll sing one last hymn together. I'll invite you to come up. If there's anything that you want to pray about, if there's anything that you're struggling with that you want to talk to me about after service, I would love to spend some time with you. So God bless you. I love you guys.